Quentin Tarantino.
Very nice.
And I think we're going to talk today about the Tarantino reviews section on the New Beverly Cinema site. So Quentin has been writing about a wide variety of films, TV, and other things on our site that I encourage you to check out. And most recently, he posted an interview that he conducted when he was 20 with John Milius. I know that we were just talking about that before we started recording.
Fantastic interview.
Oh, thank you. There's still I have a whole big section left to publish where it's like we go in depth on Apocalypse Now.
Oh, nice.
Which had only been about I think 4 years old or 3 years old around that time. 3 years earlier. And so he goes into a lot of detail about that and about his relationship with Francis Ford Coppola. It's really cool and it's really touching.
I have a follow-up question about that interview. So you conducted it when you were 20. You talked to his assistant and said that you were writing a book. When you reconnected with John Milius after you made Reservoir Dogs, did he remember you doing that interview?
Yes, he did. I mean, he remembers the guy. I mean, he didn't remember me or what was said or anything like that. But he had a vague memory. Not like it all came back to him, but he had a vague memory of a young man my age coming to see him and interviewing him in his office, and him inviting me on the set of Uncommon Valor. And probably what he remembered more than anything else was actually the interview. The interview was a lot of fun. I didn't really even know how to interview people, so we just talked about this the entire time. As you can tell, half the interview was me talking about William Smith. I'm going to interview him about directing. I don't even know enough about directing to ask him about directing. And one of the things I don't put in the interview is in there a little bit, but I cut it way back. Is when I listen to the tapes, it's totally embarrassing how much I talk. I just never shut up. I'm there interviewing him, but I'm just so excited to be talking to him that I just want him to think I'm a cool guy. And so I'm like, well, let me tell you about this, and let me tell you about that. I'm making all these declarative statements, and I'm talking about everything I like. And so, I got rid of half the crap I said. It's just me trying to impress him and just like, shut up. This is Douglas' interview. Eventually you get down to a question after I've talked forever, holding forth about this movie or that movie and this genre and that genre and my thoughts. But then he invited me on the set of Uncommon Valor, and so we did a bit of an interview, but then at some point, because it was an all-night shoot, his little trailer became this place where everyone was hanging out. And so a couple people that were working on the film were hanging out in the trailer. And then at some point, Patrick Swayze joined us, and his buddy Frank McRae, who's in a lot of his movies, was there all night. And a couple of other people joined us. And we just talked about movies, all right, for about 3 hours. And different actors would join us, and then they get yanked away from the first AD to go back to work. And and I'm, this is way before I worked at Video Archives, and it was one of those moments where it was like, oh my God, this is like the greatest day in my life, because I was hanging with these movie professionals, and I was so far away from being able to make a living doing any kind of film work. It just seemed, it seemed like from the earth to the moon at that point in time. And I was just a film geek, but I didn't even have film geek friends. I was literally all by myself. And so just being in this company of people who did this for a living, and I was, for that night anyway, I was accepted with them. And I was hanging with them, and they listened to what I said, and I listened to what they said. And then there, for that moment, that night, there was no difference. And oh wow, I did have that feeling. Well, if they could do it, I could do it. Now, it took me a long time after to get anything going, but I had these little tiny moments. And the thing is, I didn't, when I called his assistant and said I was writing a book, I wasn't calling her. I actually intended to write a book. It was on film directors. I thought I would start with the interviews and then write the pieces. And the book was called Cinema of the Outrageous. And I even learned how to say it in French. It was Cinema du Outrageous. And I never finished it because I was 20 and I was a flake, and I was too young and far too flaky to write a book. But I had every intention of writing the book, and I started off with interviews. And so I interviewed I interviewed a few people back then. I interviewed John Mulius. I interviewed Joe Dante.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I interviewed Joe Dante in his office, and then he invited me on the set of Gremlins. And I interviewed him on the set of Gremlins. But they had me behind a partition because I wasn't supposed to see what a gremlin looked like. And then there was this time where they were shooting, and also I had all this access to him because Gremlin's head fell off. So they took him a while to fix the Gremlin head. And so I'm sitting there talking to him. Then they fix it, but then they see he's talking, so they just let us talk for a while. So I'm really like this guy just visiting the set, and I have Joe Dante, where they could be shooting for probably at least 20 minutes earlier, but they're just kind of letting them talk. And at some point, okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I kind of see that they're done, and they're kind of waiting for me to come, but they don't want to say anything. So I interviewed Joe Dante. I interviewed Richard Franklin, who was a big fan of the Australian Hitchcock. I was a huge fan of Road Games. And I interviewed him on this, not on the set, but he had just shot the movie. I interviewed him in his office at Universal right after he had done
Cloak and Dagger. Oh, Psycho 2, cool.
So I hadn't seen Psycho 2 yet, but I'd seen Patrick, and I had seen Road Games, and I love Road Games. And it was also cool because I had seen Patrick, but I'd only seen the American version where they cut it down and dubbed it with American accents. But he had a 16mm print of the longer version with Australian accents. And so he lent me the 16mm print, and I had to find somebody who had a 16mm projector so I could watch it. And in fact, I don't even remember why I did this. For whatever reason, when I met Richard Franklin, I used a different name. I don't know why. I'm sure I had a reason back then. And it was Nick Jerome. And so, so I interviewed them. I interviewed John Flynn, the director of Rolling Thunder, and I interviewed him in his house. And I still have those tapes. And actually, it was interesting. I have the tapes for all these guys. It was interesting because he put on these Morricone stores. So if you play the tapes back, it's like scored to Morricone standards.
Oh, wow.
Nice. And then there was these directors who had done an exploitation movie, like either one or two, and usually about one that had come out within the last 2 years or so that I was a fan of, that I thought were good. And so I wanted to meet them and talk to them about how to get a movie made and how they got a movie made, and to not just talk to guys who were famous, but guys who I liked, who had just done an exploitation, just done something interesting. And so I interviewed Nick Castle, who had played the Shape in Halloween, because he had done his first film was a movie called Tad, the Assassination Game, with Robert Carradine and Linda Hamilton, that I thought was really good. And I interviewed Alan Holtzman, the director of Forbidden World. And he was a big editor at New World Pictures. So I interviewed him, and I interviewed, I saw him at his, I think he was living with his mom. I went to his mom's house. I interviewed Mark Rossman, who directed House on Sorority Row. And not only, it was a really good slasher film, not only did he direct the House on Sorority Row, he was also part of that crew of students that went to Sarah Lawrence College that shot Brian De Palma's home movies.
Wow, interesting.
So he told so not only did he tell me about making a House of Sorority Row, he told me the whole story about making home movies with Brian De Palma.
Who I assume would have been on your list of directors to talk to at that point, right?
Well, Okay, well, he was my biggest hero. All right, in the world at that time, I had two heroes, and it was Juan Williamson. It was Brian De Palma and Howard Hawks. Howard Hawks was dead, so we were going to meet him. Except once I had a dream where I met him. It was a cool dream. It was like Howard Hawks was having a party, and I was invited to the party. And Robert Mitchum was there. It was pretty cool. Anyway, but through Mark Rossman, I got to know on the phone anyway, Brian De Palma's assistant. And so his assistant was vaguely down with setting me up with an interview because he was in town. He was shooting at Universal. They were shooting Scarface. So he was in town and he was at Universal. They were shooting on the sound stations at Universal for a lot of stuff. So he was right there. And so there was talk. There was negotiations. There was talk about getting me on the set of Scarface. Can you imagine getting on the set of Scarface? There was talk about me being on the set of Scarface. And actually having watching it work for a little bit, and then doing an interview with him, which I might, if that had happened, I might never been a filmmaker because I might have just committed suicide afterwards.
Yeah. Harry Carey moments.
I could ever get, and it never happened. It never happened. But I even remember when it was done. It wasn't going to happen, and he was a nice guy about it. He was like, well, I'm sorry, Quentin, we couldn't get it together. It didn't happen. And I almost interviewed George Miller.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because they were all doing. They had actually at that time, because Joe Dante had just done the Twilight Zone, the movie. His assistant and George Miller's assistant were the same assistant.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the guys I almost met. So I mean, for a guy who knew fuck all in the industry and was as non-legit as you could possibly be, not a high school dropout, but a junior high dropout, I thought he did a pretty good job.
If you had had a podcast back then, it would have been a hit podcast, Quentin. It sounds like
I actually got John Milius to write a letter of recommendation for me as a filmmaker.
Wow.
Oh, that's cool.
Still have that letter, actually.
So are you planning on transcribing more of these over the years for the site?
Yeah, eventually. Yeah, it's kind of, I just happen to have, I know exactly where the tapes are because I'd actually just listened to the John Flynn tape recently, not recently, I'm Israel, but when I was in Los Angeles. I'd listened to it recently for something I was doing research on. And it's like the first time I heard it in a long time. And so I think I probably will. I was going to just break the ice on it with this Milius one, but I actually have like the transcript of the Milius one that I just did by hand here. And it's like, oh, well, this will be a good one. This will be a good one to do. I'll get started.
That sounds like a great choice cut. We'll just take the choice cut audio bits you want at some point, and that's a great episode right there.
Yeah.